I'm Farah Samuel and I'm from Telenor, Pakistan. I'm working as Manager Corporate Innovation. We are so delighted to have you all here with us today. Telenor Velocity is a corporate accelerator wherein we help with the growth stage startups and we help them scale. And one of the legs of Velocity is community engagement, and that's where our Duck Stories come in. डक स्टोरीज क्या है, क्यों है, ये आपको आज की इस कॉन्वर्सेशन से भी पता चलेगा. बट एज द नेम सजेस्ट्स, बेसिकली डक स्टोरीज इज अ प्लेटफॉर्म वेयर वी celebrate failures shamelessly. We learn about failures and we learn from some seasoned entrepreneurs why failures are so important and how those failures led them to success. So this is the second episode of 2022. We are so excited that we are bringing to you this episode here in Karachi, and this is in collaboration with NIC. Of course, they are community and venue partners. And I think the fact that we are all, we always assume that we are done with COVID, and then another wave just hits us all. So we just thought that before things get worse, we should be here and we should conduct this episode. And it's so good to see everybody so healthy and happy, hopefully. I think that deserves a round of applause. So from Karachiites to Karachiites. So today in this episode, we'll be talking about pivoting, right? You can see in the backdrop, the topic is pivot, strategies to stay in the game. It's very important for us to understand why businesses pivot, what is business pivoting, and the strategies and what not. We have some local use cases. हमारे पास Kareem का use case है when they pivoted, and then Tariq can also shed some light on that, why they pivoted. Airlift Technologies का हमारे पास use case है. There's another example of Slack. I don't know how many of you use Slack for communication. Slack also started as a tool for internal communication within the team, and then they realized that no, this could go big. So उसको एक platform बना दिया गया, for the wider audience. And so pivot takes many forms. It doesn't have to be like, big shift. It could be a shift in your entire product. It could be a shift in just a feature of your product. But that's all that we are going to learn, and I won't say much because I'm not the expert here. I'll be moderating this panel, and I would like to introduce my amazing speakers. I have with me today Wali Muhammad. Wali is the head of enterprise solutions at Telenor Pakistan. Then I have Noreen Hayat. She is the CEO at Zood Pay. And then I have Tariq Elahi. He is the chairman, Deguada. So, as my first question to my speakers, I would like you all to introduce yourselves and also tell us briefly about your business and what you're doing. Let me start with Wali.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Wali Mohd, as Farah just told you. I've joined Telenor like 3.5 years back. Majority of my experience is with telcos, and it was with GSM, which is a core business of telco. So this year I've been tasked to head a vertical, which is a newly created vertical of enterprise solution, where we provide complex solutions to the problems and the digitalization of existing customers, be it their human resource, be it their inventory management or Salesforce lead, sort of. So it's a new venture which Telenor has entered into.
Assalamu everyone, I'm Noreen Hayat. I'm now CEO of Zood Pay, which acquired Pace Financial Services, where I happen to be a co-founder. We are a fintech. So Pace is lender, we're a digital lender, and the acquisition now, which places us to be a digital lending platform for e-commerce, and what we're trying to build now is an ecosystem for the online merchant, and ultimately lending not only to the SME but also the consumer of the SME via building e-commerce, e-logistics, and ultimately fintech. That's what we're doing.
Thank you, Noreen. Assalamualaikum. I'm Tariq Elahi. I'm chairman and founder of Deguada. So Deguada is, to simplify it, we're a trucking platform. And to simplify it further, you could say that we are the Uber and the cream of trucking. But we are so much more than that. And like Farah was mentioning earlier, I'm an ex-Kareem, and it's something that I'm very proud of. Kareem, I think, has contributed so much to the ecosystem. But Kareem, again, was so much more than just ride-hailing. It was more than getting a person from point A to B or the food delivered to your house. Kareem, as a lot of you know, they've morphed into a super app. And that was our vision as well. We wanted to solve the problems for the ecosystem, not just get goods from point A to B, but also see what are the other issues that a trucker, a shipper, a manufacturer face in a day-to-day business in Pakistan. And that's the problem we're trying to solve over here. So I'm hoping that over the next hour, we're going to give you some ideas on how you can pivot and what are some of the learnings that we've had. Thank you.
So thank you, Tariq. I was hoping you would keep the mic to yourself so I can pose the next question to you.
Sure.
But no, that's fine. So as we've begun with the conversation, I think it's very important to set the context. So just to begin, you need to define pivot for our audience.
Sure.
Everybody might have a different understanding, and based on your experience from your business, you will all have different way to define what pivot looks like. So if briefly you could, set the context. So each one of you taking a turn, just briefly set the context, please.
Back to me, yeah. But thank you, Paula. I think so. It's a very good thing that you said. You got to set the context. Pivot, unfortunately, in the startup world, has become a bit of a negative connotation. लोग समझते हैं कि यार आप pivot कर रहे हैं because आपका जो original idea था it hasn't worked out. Farah mentioned a very good thing about Slack, and I'm someone who is a big proponent of Slack. We use it across our company. हम Daegu Wadda में भी इस्तेमाल करते हैं. We've used it very extensively over in Kareem as well. Do you know that आपने जो भी mention किया था कि Slack was an internal communication. Actually, that was the second pivot. The first pivot of Slack was not even an internal communication. It was actually gaming. So it used to be a game. आपको याद होगा 3-4 साल पहले there was this game Farmville. So Slack started off a game like that. So what would happen is the four of us, we would be playing the game, but during the game we would communicate, okay, what are the strategies, right? So Farah, should I take this move? Mani, should I do this? Noreen, what are you making as the next move? And the game flopped. Interesting enough, so they went bankrupt. But what they suddenly realized was there was so much communication happening between the players that itself was the pivot they needed. So then they started pivoting within people that are playing the game. And that's where you were mentioning. And then they suddenly realized, but that's maybe only a few thousand people. There's a whole universe outside of that. And that's where Slack began, So pivoting doesn't mean, well, in the case of Slack, yes, they went bankrupt. So it was a move that they had to do. But I can give so many more examples. Instagram, one of the most used apps out there. Instagram was not at all what we see right now. Instagram used to be a check-in app several years ago. I think, so I'm a bit of a dinosaur in the startup age, so I'm a bit older than 99% of the people here. So you guys maybe don't remember, there was this video company called Blockbuster. जो हमारे हर कोने पे इधर वीडियो शॉप होती थी ना VHS वाली, we relate to that. So Blockbuster was the giant. They used to do the videotape rental. This was back in the late 80s, 90s, and they had to pivot. Netflix came in, and Netflix said, why should people have to go to a video store to rent that thing? We can actually deliver it via FedEx and UPS in the US. So that was a huge pivot that's how Netflix started out. Netflix was a competitor to the bricks and mortar business. And that worked amazingly for 5 years. And probably could have continued for another 5 years. But Netflix said, we have to iterate it, we have to continue pivoting. So pivoting, what I wanted to emphasize is pivoting is not a bad word. Pivoting could happen, yes, because your business is not moving forward, but your business could be booming. Netflix was the darling business of the early 90s. One of the fastest growing businesses, but they suddenly realized we can go even faster. They said, yeah, instead of us sending VHS tapes and DVDs, why don't we go online and start streaming, right? So that happened about 10 years ago. And now Netflix has suddenly realized, if we're streaming, there are other companies that are coming into the business, Stars Play, and and there are tons of other companies that are competing. Why don't we come into our own productions? So that's what Netflix has suddenly come into. They've become a producer of original content. So that was another pivot they did about 3 years back. We consume, I think, on a regular basis a lot of their original content. So pivoting could actually be something that you have to do when you're successful as well. It could be, it means so many things for different companies, and hopefully I think the next hour or so we're going to talk you through different types of pivots and how to go about it.
No, that was very eloquently explained. It was very fun, I would love to have you as a teacher. I think, absolutely, I would second Tariq. Pivot, well, in my view, is a very powerful ability to have. And pivot kya hai? It's for a startup at least, So see, I think one thing that's constant for all of us is change. And we as entrepreneurs get into startups not knowing what the next day is going to look like. So I think we're conditioned, well, I don't know whether we are conditioned, but we ultimately are conditioned to some extent to be ready to change if the circumstances require us to do so. And recently, particularly ever since COVID, I think we've been, well, maybe forced or nudged to be more open to accepting change. So I think pivot hota kya hai? Technically, when you're actually when you start off a company, or even if you've gone into many years in a company, there's a certain strategy that you're moving with. वो business strategy हो सकती है, product strategy हो सकती है, and maybe customer segmentation strategy हो सकती है. And many times, in order to remain relevant or to grow or to scale, you might have to make changes in that strategy which initially you hadn't planned for. So I think pivot, मेरे ख्याल से एक entrepreneur के लिए एक must-have ability है. It's actually probably one of the most integral elements of success for any entrepreneur. And I think I actually often talk about, for me, the 5 P's, that I talk about. One is, of course, purpose. उसके बगैर तो वैसे ही कुछ नहीं है. Passion. Then I talk about power of the pack, which is a team. Then there's, of course, perseverance, and then pivot. Pivot is a very, very strong P. To remain relevant, अगर आप नहीं change करेंगे जब आपको ज़रूरत है, you will probably, you'll die. So I think I'll actually probably be sharing more of, a lot of our experiences with pivot. एक चीज़ होती है fail fast innovation approach. Startups में बहुत ज़्यादा, we try to adopt that. And if we stick on to a particular strategy or an idea, and we become too attached to it, तो आप fail fast innovation approach को कर ही नहीं सकते. And I think what happens is we as entrepreneurs get so emotionally attached to our ideas that it becomes very difficult to even budge from the idea of doing something different. वो design में एक चीज, when they talk about product design, they talk about breaking your design. So when you're coming out with a product, वो आपको बार-बार कहते हैं कि go back to the drawing board and try to break it as many times as you can. Even if you like how a product or a customer journey works and the customer doesn't like it, it's not going to work, So you have to learn to break your design. And that's also part of pivot, I'd say. So I think for me there are many different parts to pivoting, but some can happen on a bigger level, some can happen on a more intricate or a more granular level.
Sorry, because she said something very beautiful, which reminded me of my journey when I started when I was 16 years old. Emotions. So I think we've got so many entrepreneurial people in the room right now, and we've all realized, okay, when you're starting up a startup, it's not just a business. This is our baby. It's a part of our immediate family, right? And emotions, we cling on to them. And Nori mentioned this, she mentioned a very good point. I've been guilty of this as well. They're businesses that I started when I was in my teens, early youth, and I said, yeah, this is an amazing idea, and I'm going to go with it right till the end. I was a fool. I should have pivoted earlier, right? Because my emotions were getting the better of me. There were a couple of businesses. I have quite a bit of experience in the food business. So I have a pizza business. I've done so many multiple food business, and I would say, yeah, this is the best burger. This is the best pizza. Ego would take over. So emotions, like Noreen mentioned, is something that we have to detach ourselves from. It's like having a kid and saying that, you know what, this is the best kid possible. I couldn't ask for a better kid, but we've got to keep in mind a startup is slightly different. Yes, we can improve upon it. Ego comes in where I say, yeah, this is the best. So, I'm just giving an example of a food business. I had a startup food business. I said, yeah, this is the best burger in town. I thought that. Maybe 10 or 15 of my close friends thought that. But I think 100 other 1,000 people in the community probably didn't think that because it failed. So you have to take failure as a road to success and don't let ego get in the way. Ego and emotion. I'm sorry I got the mic from you, but Noreen mentioned a very good thing about emotion.
Thank you. The panel members जिन्होंने इतनी explanation दे दी ना, believe me, I'm left with डेढ़ दो अल्फाज रहेंगे बस तो बताने के लिए. So you guys have talked a lot about startups. Pivoting there's a very thin line between deciding whether to pivot or not. Believe me, it could be a product which might not work. It doesn't have all the required essentials, जो elements होते हैं. Or there could be other things as well. Probably the strategy by which you are promoting your product, message क्या deliver to the audience, whether you have selected the right audience or not. So there's a very thin line. There's nothing, could be a possibility that there's nothing wrong with the product. It's how you're marketing, how you're planning your strategy, how you strategize. So you know what you guys have done. I've never worked in a startup, right? So my whole experience is with B2B. I have sold business to business, be it a courier company, be it a mobile phone manufacturers or a telco. मैंने हमेशा B2B में ही sales किया. But in last 3-4 years, what I've observed, what I've analyzed, I've met with my colleagues, ex-colleagues, everyone. So what you guys have done, कोई भी बड़ी organization, when they decide to put and launch a new service or new product, they inject जितना भी amount जो उनका मसल होता है, they put in the right people, किसको successful बना. वो होता है नहीं होता, that's another thing. But in the last 3 years, what I've realized, what I've analyzed, कि अब organizations, as multinationals be, if they launch a new product, they make someone responsible and they say it's a startup for you. Hire the right people. You have to manage the balance sheet. You have to manage the EBITDA, everything. ये आप लोगों के ये startup के बाद ये founders की तरह अब mindset ही बिल्कुल change हो गया है. वो organization जो कि established हैं, उनको उसे एक product से भी फर्क नहीं पड़ता. But this is how they are now launching their products and services in the market. So it's a game changer. You startups ने बिल्कुल चीजें change कर दी हैं, how established business operate, और startups में लोग evolve कर ही रहे हैं every day. So that's from my side.
I'm actually going to continue the history that Tarek started. Wali actually mentioned a very, very interesting point. I think pivot करने की ability, maybe it's inversely proportional also to the size and the extent of a business. Maybe someone like Telenor, जो इतना vast है, which has been in operations in so many years, ability and agility to pivot will not be as easy, as someone like ourselves. So, it's a much smaller animal as compared to someone like you. So I think even if the will exists to pivot, it's not always easy, to actually pivot, even if you feel, you understand the need for it. That's also important.
So all three of them have set the context really, really well, and I would like to take the conversation one step above now. Noreen, आपने अपने जवाब में भी mention किया कि you have had a lot of experience, and I was reading up about it. You mentioned that with Days Financial Services you got to pivot thrice, right? So I'm sure there's like huge experience in all those experiences of pivoting. So tell us, what was the trigger? What caused you to pivot, and how did you making up your mind and all that, we've understood that, okay, you did, but then how the actual thing happened?
मैं एक्चुअली थोड़ा सा बीच में आती हूँ इन जर्नी. जब कोविड शुरू हुआ, so I was used to have almost daily calls with one of my board members who's in DC, and I think हमसे ज़्यादा those people were nervous कि भाई आगे कैसे जाएगा. We in the business of lending, वो भी un and underbank को lending करते हैं हम. So they're like, what are you guys thinking? What are the next steps? I was like, let's take it easy. For us, he's like, things are so uncertain. How are we going to manage it? I was like, when were things ever certain for entrepreneurs? We get into this business because it is always going to be uncertain. From day one, it was uncertain. So for us, COVID was, for example, just another challenge. So I think actually, हमारा pivot. So prior to this, I co-founded another company. It's called Check-in Solution, which was also fintech. और हमने शुरू किया था with making a digital deal application. So that purpose of that was to automate the entire credit disbursement process. This is back in 2014-15. ये वो time है जब microfinance institutions weren't even regulated. So I think थोड़ा सा से आगे जाते when they started, the plan actually was not to get our own license. We thought that we'd partner with one of the banks. We'll provide the technology. It'll be easier to scale, and we'll just write off the bank's balance sheet, providing the services that we'll be building. I won't be naming the bank, but the kind of commercial model that they came up with, it was corrosive. I wouldn't even say it was aggressive. It was literally corrosive to how they were treating us. So I think a बहुत चीजें change हो गई in how partnerships and collaborations are being viewed. But that's when we decided, yeah, if we have to do this, we have to show how it's done, and we'd rather go and get our license ourselves, and build our own balance sheet. And that's when that was the first pivot in the strategy, and we became the first fintech to get an NBFC license for lending. So that was the trigger, and that's what we ended up doing. So 2018 में we got our NBFC license, but we'd already started working on piloting our product. So एक तो ये था. दूसरा था इसी दौरान तेज का model, with how we started off was the vision was to become a full stack neobank at that time, and by full stack we wanted to provide 4 different types of financial services. The hope was to start with credit, then build on with savings, insurance, and ultimately investments. So it full stack neobank ka vision tha. And how we thought initially was that we will actually create 4 different apps for each vertical, and we launch it in the market and see how it goes. अब जब हम लोगों ने develop करना शुरू किया अपना पहला product, which was credit, my God, it was a great experience, but so much went into it. Tech teams, business teams, it took a lot of our time. And when we were talking to investors, उनका सवाल होता था, how do you actually plan on launching all of these services together? For you, it's important कि पहले आप एक product को master करें, फिर आप बाकी products साथ से लाते रहे. We were over ambitious. जैसे तारिक ने कहा ना, entrepreneur's ego, it's a real thing and a very dangerous thing. हम सब में होती है वो चीज़. तो वो I think that was early on where हमें अपना थोड़ा सा ego manage करने की ज़रूरत पड़ी, and we were like, ठीक है, what we should do is, it makes sense to have one app जहाँ सारे चारों products होंगे, and that will actually be better because हमें एक cross sell और upsell की ability हमें वहाँ से आती. So you actually hook the customer in through credit, and आस्ता you learn from the journey, क्या learnings आए data से, और फिर आप cross sell and upsell करें बाकी products as per their needs. And then that pivot happened where we went on from the idea of having 4 different apps to having a single app. This was also very early on. ये भी 2018 की बात है. I think पहले 6 महीनों में हमें बहुत धचके लग चुके थे. Reality checks that we had to make those changes very fast. And then छोटी मोटी challenges तो आते रहते. But I think the third, I don't know इसको pivot कहना चाहिए कि नहीं, but I think strategy का because हिस्सा नहीं था. Our next plan after credit was to launch savings. But then COVID struck, and as we all know, insurance was something that we thought was the need of the hour. And that's when we decided that we should actually launch an insurance vertical जहाँ हम COVID cover via insurance partners दे सकें. And I think that was the fastest product development and launch. I think it took us about 2 to 3 weeks to develop that product and launch it. And we launched insurance within our app for COVID cover and hospitalization for COVID. So I think those were primarily the 3 pivots that we went through our journey at Days. And मजे की बात ये है कि ever since we got acquired by Zood, I think that's it's required to be relevant. Zood की भी कुछ journey interesting ही थी इसी तरह. But I don't know whether ये jinxed है हम pivots के साथ या maybe it's something that all successful startups have to do. They actually also started with primarily an e-commerce focus. They're in 6 markets. उनका focus था to have an e-commerce marketplace. And after they realized that e-commerce के अंदर margins जो हैं, the only way to build margins is actually if you start lending on it. So they started venturing into BNPL very recently. But BNPL भी आप देख रहे हैं जैसे model break कर रहा है. There's a lot going on. So their pivot also happened very fast. So they went on from becoming an e-commerce centric company to a fintech focused strategy, where e-commerce literally is more of an acquisition tool where lending then comes into. So yeah, a lot of those things happening within these 2 years of my journey.
How did the people go the insurance part?
Insurance actually हमें बहुत अच्छी traction मिली. But I think हम तो pivot बहुत जल्दी कर सके. Insurance companies इतनी जल्दी नहीं pivot कर सकी थी. So what happened was, and I won't mention the insurance company again, हुआ ये कि बहुत ज़्यादा claims आने शुरू हो गए थे insurance के ऊपर. तो insurance company ने कहा यार हम तो बंद ही हो जाएंगे अगर ऐसे चला. Actually हमें अपना काम करना पड़ेगा, which is actually covering those claims. We won't be able to survive. So they're like, let's discontinue this. So that's what we actually acted with at the end of the day.
Thank you, Noreen. I'm sure there was a lot of, there were a lot of interesting points that you all picked up on. I would like to move towards Devatta now. So Tariq, हमें ये बताइए कि आपकी जो business strategy है, how does pivot align to that? थोड़ा सा background देते जाइएगा कि since when did you start with Devatta? और अब तक कोई pivoting हुई है, even if it has been on a granular level.
Right.
So just, tell us something about that.
Thank you, Colin. So actually, it's an excellent question. And I'm actually going to reverse a bit to what Noreen had mentioned a couple of minutes ago. Mashallah, this is a very successful business. And with every successful business, you have a lot of stakeholders involved. And I think you had mentioned, the board, investors. And what happens more often than not is when you have multiple stakeholders involved, I think a lot of startups have a knee-jerk reaction. आपकी board meeting होती है, board meeting कहता है कि यार, and I'm been in that situation where they say कि यार, there are 5 other companies in the transportation field, they're hitting this GMV, why aren't we hitting this? Investors will come and say, yeah, well, they've invested, they've raised $17 million. Why is it that we are only raising $100,000, right? So, I think a lot of founders have that knee-jerk reaction. Okay, if the board is putting pressure on us, if investors are putting pressure on us, we must pivot and we must raise more money or we must change our strategy. I think as a founder, you must stay very true to your vision as well. So, like Noreen and Wali were saying, there will be a lot of times where you should pivot, but there are certain times where you have that gut instinct. आपको एक होती instinct कि यार no, I'm going to push back on the board, I'm going to push back on my investors, I'm going to stay true to my vision. I don't need to pivot, and it's too early for me to pivot. And I'm someone who's been there as well, you know. I'm so glad that I didn't pivot. So kind of this is like antithesis to what we're talking about, that one must pivot. Yes, one must if you're up against a wall and you feel that's what the company requires. But there are certain times where you just have to iterate. That's slightly different from a pivot. You just go to switch a bit. Pivot ka you होता है. And in my philosophy, a pivot is something that should be a long-term strategy. It should not be a knee-jerk strategy, right? So pivot is you feel that locally I'll give you an example. Airlift, and I mean this in a very good sense. Airlift started off as a mobility of people company. They were competing with the likes of Swivel. And they realized that, hey, Swivel has captured a majority share in the market. The market is saturated. We're not going to be able to compete that competitively. We feel we've got to do 180-degree turn, and we've got to do the mobility of groceries, and that's what Ellipse pivoted to. So you have that whole change. But there's a lot of companies out there. They just need to tweak that 10-15 degrees plus minus. A pivot normally is a pretty major shift. A pivot comes about because you feel that your bottom line is not being there. You feel that the company's strategy is not spot on, you have to change. Sometimes you just need a small tweak. So I'm not saying that one shouldn't pivot, but if you feel that you need a small tweak in the business model, doesn't mean that you need to go to the extreme of doing a pivot as well. And I think as founders, you guys should be the ones that take the final call, not the stakeholders, not the board members, because you guys are so close to the business. And I've been guilty of that at times. In my earlier career, maybe when I'm 19, 20 years old, I had investors in my business, and they said, "Kali, you have to pivot," and you get intimidated. Oh shit, these guys have so much more experience than me, and they're investing. I must pivot. But at the end of the day, you guys as founders and future founders are living that dream every day, so you know it better than investors, better than stakeholders, better than board members. So pivoting is important, but you have to think it through as well.
Well said, Tariq. Or I think it's very important to remember that हर बार pivot की ज़रूरत नहीं होती है. So the understanding of pivot is also very important. Sometimes a slight tweak is all that you need. But I would also like to add that understanding your customer, doing your market research from time to time is also very critical. Be it for the decision of pivoting, or be it for the decision of those slight changes that you need to have maybe in your strategy, in your product. So that's also one of the things. I would like to pose my next question to Wali. Wali, we have an audience here of startups, and it's a great opportunity for Telenor to talk about our B2B business. So थोड़ा सा audience को बताइए कि Telenor के B2B में what are the products that we have, and then how do we add value to our customers, as well as has Telenor as a business pivoted? If so, why?
Alright, I'll start with the second question first. In continuation, when I mentioned that there's a very thin line on to decide whether to pivot or not, I have two very good examples. Last 3-4 years back, I'm sure most of you guys know that telco, when I talk about telco, GSM business is in saturation. Pakistan में market base नहीं बढ़ रही, एक किसी के से दूसरे के पास जा रही, operator he का cutthroat competition, and they're getting the other shares. That's how it's going on. So Telenor started like 3-4 years ago how to increase business, how to increase revenue. So what we did was like 3-4 years back, we thought there are tracking companies. So there are two practical examples. It would help you and you will understand why it is so important to do the research part, data analytics to reach to a decision. So we thought that there are a lot of tracking companies. I'll explain that tracking devices that is being placed on your vehicles uses a SIM to communicate with the servers कोई कमांड देनी है, बंद करनी है गाड़ी या उसकी लोकेशन चेक, दिस इज डन थ्रू सिम, व्हिच इज ट्रैकिंग डिवाइस में। वी थॉट व्हाई नॉट वी शुड लॉन्च अवर ट्रैकिंग डिवाइस। सब ट्रैकिंग कंपनीज अच्छा बूमिंग बिजनेस है, कंडीशंस पाकिस्तान की ऐसी हैं कि एवरीबॉडी प्लेसेस अ ट्रैकर इन द कार, सो व्हाई नॉट गेट इनटू दिस बिजनेस एंड वी लॉन्च अ ट्रैकिंग डिवाइस। वी स्ट्रगल्ड फॉर अ ईयर, believe we couldn't compete with the tracking companies. कुछ कंपनीज ऐसी हैं जो बड़ी अच्छी उस पे थी और कुछ तो जी मशरूम थी कि दो कमरों में खोल के और आधी प्राइस पे बेच रही थी। We couldn't compete with, honestly, and we thought कि probably ये बिजनेस हमारे बस का नहीं है, ये वही लोग कर सकते हैं। हम प्राइस भी अच्छी देंगे, हम कनेक्टिविटी भी बेहतर देंगे क्योंकि स्टाइल और ब्रांड इमेज है, सब चीजें, बट आई थिंक हम वी थॉट कि हम इनसे कंपीटिंग। देन वी डिड सम एनालिटिक्स, हमने करना शुरू किया, पर वी स्टॉप। हमने जब प्रमोट करना छोड़ दिया, वी डिड लाइक 6-7 months वी डिड अ हेक्टिक ब्रेनस्टॉर्मिंग सेशन एंड वी केम टू अ कंक्लूजन कि देयर इज नथिंग रॉन्ग विद द प्रोडक्ट। जब वो एक मशरूम में बैठ के 2-3 कमरों में खोल के बेशक प्राइस कम पे बेच रहा है, तो बेच तो रहा है, व्हाई कांट एनीवन सेल इट? देन वी केम टू अ कंक्लूजन कि जब हम जाके कहते हैं ना कस्टमर को क्या कि मैं जीएसएम कंपनी सिम बेचने वाला, आज ट्रैकिंग डिवाइस बेचने हैं, तो हम बाय नहीं करते। वैसा नहीं करिए तो जीएसएम किधर से, उनसे ही लो जो काम करते हैं हमें। सो व्हाट वी डिड, हमने स्ट्रेटेजी चेंज कर, वी स्टॉप सेइंग इट एज अ ट्रैकिंग डिवाइस, हमने उसका नाम दे दिया ऑक्सो, IoT प्लेटफॉर्म। अब उसमें भी एडेड अप ट्रैकिंग डिवाइस को पिच करने से ज्यादा हमने पिच करना शुरू किया टेम्परेचर मॉनिटरिंग, आपकी रिसोर्स मॉनिटरिंग, आपके डीप फ्रीजर्स में अगर आपका क्रिटिकल दवाइयां पड़ी तो उसकी टेम्परेचर कैसे मॉनिटर करेंगे, आपके जेनसेट में फ्यूल कितना यूज हो रहा है उसको कैसे मॉनिटर करेंगे, इन डिवाइसेस सेंसर्स के थ्रू करेंगे। एंड देन वी आल्सो स्टार्टेड विद ट्रैकिंग डिवाइस भी, जिसको हमने ऑक्सो कहते हैं। सो व्हेन वी स्टार्टेड गोइंग टू द B2B कस्टमर्स saying that we would provide you IoT solutions, they accepted। higher IoT solution टेम्पो कॉम्प्लीमेंट करता है, ट्रैकर उसका पार्ट, बेचा में ट्रैकर ही ज्यादा, IoT से ज्यादा solution, but वो इस तरह बिका। So there was nothing wrong with the product, it is how it's strategized, कैसे कुछ बेचना है। So when COVID started we thought यार क्या नीड ऑफ द आवर है। हमने देखा सबसे बड़ा मसला जो है स्कूलों में पढ़ाई का है, बच्चे जा रहे हैं, किस तरह मॉनिटर होगा, किस तरह मैनेज होगा। सो वी लॉन्च अ प्रोडक्ट, ये था नहीं। जब हमने कोविड में लाइक स्टार्टेड, उसमें 4-5-6 महीने टुक अस टू डेवलप द प्रोडक्ट, क्योंकि वो इतना अचानक से कोविड का आया और हमने रियलाइज करने लॉन्च करना है। एंड वी वेंट इनटू द स्कूल्स, हमने उनको पिच किया, बट हुआ क्या कि व्हेन वी लॉन्च इट, हमने उसका जो सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट पार्ट था ना, वो था कि जी टीचर्स ने बच्चों को पढ़ाना है, विजुअल कांटेक्ट होना है और उसमें उन्हें पढ़ाई उनको देनी है। तो अब वहां पे जहाँ पे हमें डेटा एनालिटिक्स की जरूरत थी, क्या हुआ जब हम गए हमें पता चला कि ये सारा काम तो जूम और टीम्स तो ऑलरेडी कर रहे हैं। अच्छा, देयर आर वेरी लिमिटेड चेन ऑफ स्कूल्स हु कुड अफोर्ड टू हैव सच अ सॉल्यूशन जहाँ पे स्टूडेंट और टीचर दोनों इक्विप्ड हों इस तरह से टीचिंग मेथड को अडॉप्ट करने के लिए। बट देन देयर वाज जूम और ऑल्दो और जो हमारा प्रोडक्ट थी उसमें मेजर पार्ट अटेंडेंस मैनेजमेंट और बाकी फी मैनेजमेंट भी था, बट हमने उसको लॉन्च ही खाली नहीं किया। उसकी प्राइमरी रीजन यही थी कि जो विजुअल में जो जाके वर्चुअल क्लासेस होनी उसको, अरे वो इट डिड नॉट वर्क आउट। हमने सोचना शुरू किया, बाय द टाइम हमको सोचे कि यार ये इसको किस तरह से करना है, क्या करना है, कोविड खत्म हो गया। सो देन वी हैड अ वेरी क्लियर पाथ, हमें पता था कि यहाँ पिवट करना पड़ेगा, इस प्रोडक्ट को छोड़ देंगे, नहीं चलेगा। सो इट ऑल डिपेंड्स कि वो सिचुएशन क्या है, कहाँ पे पिवट करना है, कहाँ पे नहीं करना। You have to realize, you have to analyze, उस पे डेटा बड़ा सपोर्ट करता है, circumstances बहुत सपोर्ट।
Thank you, Wali. Though I have a lot of questions from our panelists, but because time is of the essence, and so I would like to conclude our session. We had a wonderful conversation. One thing that you would like to give as a message to the startups, to SMEs, to business owners, small and large, about their approach towards pivot, what would that be? I'll start with that.
Thank you, Farah. So I'm going to go back to basics. So I think when you're an entrepreneur, that in itself is just a huge risk. The path most taken is you get that 9 to 5 job, you get a cushy salary, you get the perks. So I think there's something in our DNA as an entrepreneur which differentiates, I think, all the people in front of us, all the people on the panel. These guys are, mashallah, some of the best entrepreneurs that I know of in Pakistan. So, you know, that whole thought process is very different. Our wiring is different as an entrepreneur. And my whole thing is, to go back to your question, what you need to be wary of goes back to the topic, pivot. As an entrepreneur, you have agility. You have the capability to take a left and a right and a 180 degree when you feel that's the right way to do. Delano, by the way, has been an amazing partner for us. Wali and I, we've had the pleasure of working together. You know, your team has really given us a lot of insight that we would never have been able to get otherwise. It would have taken us maybe years to get that, because, you know, but you're a global mobility giant, you're able to give us that learning that would have taken us years, you're able to give that to us in weeks and months, right? But again, a giant, be it Delano or any other company, it takes a lot longer to pivot. It takes a lot longer to change to become an agile company. So I think as entrepreneurs, that is something that you have to hold dear to your heart. You know, you have an idea, you go with it, you get a gut instinct that you need to pivot, you need to be agile, go with that as well. You know?
Yeah, so I think it's such an important piece for any startup or any company's purpose at the end of the day. And whatever is needed to remain true to that purpose is something that, you know, one should be doing. I think one thing, there's such fancy words that are now being used. Entrepreneurship wasn't even a thing, you know, when we started off. Pivot, up the word, not use over there, but it's technically, you know, being vigilant enough to understand what the business requires. And, you know, one thing that I would suggest is please try to stay away from, you know, the subtle, I'd say, sin of FOMO. People who know that, particularly, you know, in our environment where, you know, starters till very recently were raising funds left, right and center. And, you know, to be honest, hum log ke liye bhi bahut bada you know, there was like this urge and this question, yeah, what are we doing wrong, or what are we not doing right, hum isna nahi raise kar sakte. I think एक और जो चीज़ है, startups, for example, raise funding not because they're in the business of raising funds, they raise funding because they need to raise funds. So I think pivot, what I would suggest actually to all entrepreneurs is be very vigilant to the subtle cues that the environment, you know, throws your way, and that can be internal as well as external. But, you know, just always remain true to your purpose. You know, one thing is that, see, life is the stories you tell yourself. And for a company, you know, it's actually the day-to-day and these little tweaks, you know, that actually make or break a company, whether it's a startup or not a startup. So I'd say, you know, just, you know, continue with the urge and that passion that you started up your company with. For example, for days, you know, it was a very bittersweet moment, you know, for this acquisition to have taken place. You know, this is Tarek ne kaha earlier, it's literally like a baby when you start a company. I was talking to, you know, you both earlier. You know, think about your company as a child. I'm not a parent, but I, you know, can relate to at least the parent of my company. If you need it to grow to a certain level beyond which you could have taken it personally yourself, then maybe foster care or foster parents is the way to go about it. So don't get, you know, protective about a company to this extent that you become over possessive about it. Let it grow, and I think everything will come along then, whether it's a pivot or anything else.
Noreen says so many good things that remind me of what I've been through as well. Honestly, you're resonating on my journey as well. So she mentioned a very good point as well. Okay, you must have gone through an amazing raise. You've done the merger as well, and we're in the midst of that fundraise as well. And we've had so many people come back to us and say in the last 3-4 months, okay, why are you raising so little, right? And my whole thing is because that is what I require. They're like, but hey, but company XYZ, your competitors are raising times 10, times 15, and they're doing sexy press releases. You're not going to be, no one's going to listen to what you're saying. I said, at the end of the day, it's not about the press release, right? It's about going back to basics. And I think that's where, and Masad, I think in front of us, we have a lot of entrepreneurial people. And I would urge you not to take, it's very easy to, when someone is giving you that carrot and saying that, yeah, I'm going to fund so many millions of dollars in your company, you want to actually think, do I need those millions of dollars, right? You actually might need a lot less than that. And you mentioned a very good point, and that's been something that I kind of stand by. Because I've been doing this for so long, a lot of the times they say no to investors, and they're like, hey, you know what, they think that I'm being egoistic. It's quite the opposite. Why raise money when you don't need it? But thanks for reminding me of that, Noreen.
I will come to the question one which I forgot. So yes, Telenor has started pivoting as well. We are not giving up the GSM core business, but we have entered into IoT, SaaS as a software SaaS solutions there, and we did a digitalized solution for Sarina Islamabad. Then we did complete digitalization of Rescue Punjab from end start to till the end of the product. Everything is being digitalized, which have increased their efficiency. So yes, Telenor has also, I wouldn't call it a pivot, but they've started looking at other options, other revenue streams to build up the revenue. Because other than inflation, there doesn't seem to be a possibility to raise the call rates due to the competition. So yes, we as a business division, we have started working with B2B customers to provide them with softwares, solutions, and digitalization of their current processes.
Thank you, Wali and Tariq and Noreen. I think now it's about time that I open the floor for some questions from the audience. This is a great opportunity for you to ask away anything around pivoting, or even if something else that just came across your mind regarding their businesses and experiences. So please just do ask away, and then we'll call it a day.
I think I'll start with so Noreen को तो मैं काफी हमारे से जानते हैं. So Noreen, I want to know the emotions that were required, जो आपके थे emotions when you were exiting your company, and how as a founder or a co-founder you would suggest कि हम उनको लें emotions को when you see that there is the possibility of exit for a startup.
Yeah, पता है मुझे नहीं पता exit. So technically we're continuing with it, So मुझे नहीं पता for all practical purposes exit है कि नहीं है. But I think it's there's a conundrum of emotions that that you're in place. बहुत positive भी होते हैं. You're very reluctant and cynical as well about certain things. But I think this entire transition happened very organically for us. God has been very kind. I literally, मेरे साथ तो I don't know. I'm truly grateful because I gotten things that I haven't even asked for. So this transition actually Zoot के साथ ये था कि we actually started. They actually approached us 2019 pre-COVID. And they were actually pursuing a partnership with us for lending. So that they only started, I think they were in 2 markets then. And they were saying that partnership करते हैं. And also कि हम लोग भी I think we were at the peak और वो ego भी बड़ा था. We were like पता नहीं कुछ नहीं बनता है लोगों के साथ काम करने का इसका let's continue with what we're doing. But then COVID happened, and for to be very honest, we had a phase in the middle where fundraising wasn't easy for us. एक तो हम पाकिस्तान में ऊपर से lending में वो भी unbanked, which is an even riskier asset class. Although that said, to the benefit of how the company performed, हम लोगों ने शुक्र हम लोग defaults बहुत अच्छे manage किए because we developed a credit scoring engine, which a lot of people actually took interest in. We had other contenders on the table for the merger as well, but the acquisition as well. But इन लोगों के साथ बातें शुरू हुई, I think what helped us was that alignment in vision and the comfort that यार अच्छा, what we couldn't have, what we couldn't have done for the company to take it to a certain level that we'd hoped for it, with these guys we can actually do that. So I think at times you have to become a little selfless and keep, your own desires aside and be a little more, pragmatic. मुश्किल होता है, but at the end of the day, that's the right way to go about it and make things easy for us.
So if I could ask a follow-up question. Zaruri nahi hai, when you said that these guys could take your company to the next level, what was it? Like, was it because the kind of scale that they were offering? Because Tarek mentioned a very good point, it isn't all about investment. It isn't all about how much. And I feel, I could be wrong, that scale is synonymous with a dollar value, or how much anybody will be putting in your, funds to grow. So what was that you felt was different that wasn't on table with other propositions with them?
So I can become a little more open about sharing this. पता है हमने तेज की जर्नी में कुछ चीज़ें सीखी, and some of those things were actually existential challenges for us. One of them was actually the way the cap table was structured. So for all startups actually ये बड़ी ज़रूरी चीज़ है, हम लोग शुरू में realize नहीं करते. We enter into, well, for us I don't even know whether it still matters, but when you're actually going on to VCs to raise funding, then it becomes a very integral conversation. Because VCs then say, यार आपके managing founders के पास अगर majority shareholding नहीं है, why should we invest in this company? So that was an existential challenge for us. I think what happened with Zood was, investment aside, because lending is बहुत complicated business है. पैसे आप burn करके भी ज़रूरी नहीं है scale करें. A lot goes into it, particularly how do you manage your defaults? How do you manage your unit economics? How do you actually go on to reach segments where you build an ecosystem? ये short term view नहीं हो सकता. आपको बहुत एक structured long term view रखना पड़ता है. So I think with these guys, the reason why I said scale was because on many levels we were getting the ability to, what's the right word? Align the company to be, to actually be directional in a way to grow कर सके. So of course investment was a part of it, but also there was a global platform है. ये लोग 6 countries में हैं, there are teams globally. वहाँ से बहुत learning. अभी हम देख रहे हैं, there's so much learning even in these last 2 months. I don't know, मुझे e-commerce के बारे में ज़्यादा नहीं पता था. Although I had this stint with an e-commerce company when I started my journey with startups, but it's been phenomenal how we've learned with these guys, and I think that it's opened the horizon for us. Pakistan, of course, is our core market, but now we're growing into other markets as well. So I think बहुत elements थे यहाँ, and वो ecosystem का जो vision है ना, वो हमें बहुत उस alignment में help की, that discussion.
So if there aren't any more questions, sorry, so sorry.
I actually have one question.
Please go ahead.
I don't mind. Okay. So I heard everything. There was a lot about purpose. There was a lot about startups, and I think we have the best of both worlds. People from industries which are very big names, and people who started companies. We talked about purpose as well. So I want to know, we talked about pivoting, right? So how do you kind of create that security zone for people who believe in your company? When you're pivoting, be it good or bad, change is uncertain, you can't predict it. But how do you make other people believe in what you see in your company? How do you kind of magnitude that? Because you might be able to believe that next is, but how would you do that? Because people start losing faith in you, right? politics increase. So how do you do that? Because you all are, I would say, industry leaders, right, in your own capacity. So how would you do that?
By the way, that's an amazing, amazing question.
You take it on, then I'll take
Yeah, but I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name.
Sorry.
Sam, that's an excellent question. It's a question that actually resonates with me a lot. Rewind about 3 years back, I was the launch country head for Kareem. And in Kareem, that was something that was very profound. That there is a vision, there's a purpose. And we all, and Kareem, mashallah, was a huge company. So imagine you've got thousands of people having that singular vision. And that's something that actually was a big learning for me. Okay, it's not talikulai having one vision. I've got to make sure whether it's 5 people in my team or 5,000 my team, they have to have a singular vision. And the reason I mentioned that, Saad, is there were a couple of very interesting moments in my career at Kareem. When I was hiring, we have the T-boy and we have the security guard at the office. So I went back to HR and I said, hey guys, if you don't mind, I've heard there's an opening for security guard and there's an opening for 2 T-boys. Can I interview them? And they said, hey, even our HR managers does not interview them. This is like an intern who basically interviews the T-boys. Why would you want to do that? I said, I want to have people with that singular vision. So my T-boy, and Mudassir Shekhar can attest to this, and I remember when we launched Kareem, so I was given the mic and I was allowed the privilege of, speaking on the floor, and they said, Tariq, please tell us about the Kareem, it was called Kareem Now back then, we made Kareem food. What made it possible? And my first words were, it would not have been possible. Amanullah was the name of our T-boy. I said, would not have been possible with an Amanullah. Uski wajah ye hai ki because we were working around the clock 24/7. So we had a timeline. We had to launch the product in about 4 months. We ended up launching the product in 2.5 months. So we were 45 days ahead of time, which is kind of unheard of in the startup industry. You always end up having some tech delays and whatnot. The reason why we were able to work around the clock was the hard work of the team, but we were fueled by caffeine. So my T-boy, he had a normal 9 to 6 job. He gets paid, regardless of whether he stays on till 10 o'clock or 12 o'clock at night, he gets paid for the 9 to 6 shift. He refused to leave. He said, Tariq sab, jab tak aap log baithe hain, main nahi jaunga. He said, I'm going to keep making the coffee for you guys. So he was an integral part. So he was part of my purpose. Purpose for us was to be the best company in terms of customer service when it came to food delivery. So you've got to find that purpose. Make sure that everyone that comes on that journey, and no one is too small. That C-level guy should have the same purpose as that guy who's the T-boy.
Everyone plays a part.
Everyone plays a part. I've learned so much from the T-boy that it's unbelievable, and that's the beauty of a startup. I think in a traditional company you don't get to experience that. So it's really something that is, I think, very unique to a startup business, and I hope you all get to experience that on this journey.
Tariq made it sound so simple. इतना आसान होता नहीं है एक one singular vision होना. So I think it's an amazing question. Why? Because while they're internal as well as external stakeholders. मुझे नहीं पता वो भी शायद internally होते होंगे, investors, board वगैरह internally होता है. But when I say internal, I'm talking wholly about the team. I think एक जो बहुत important चीज़ है, which it's transparency with the team. So I think you have to be very sincere to each and every one in the team and let them know what exactly the company is all about, what your strategy and your way of achieving those goals are. And वो साथ लेके चलना आसान काम नहीं होता. So you have for us when this transition was happening, this acquisition, it's been in the making for months now. And we thought it was a responsibility to have told the team because there were multiple contenders on the table for this acquisition. And जब acquisition होती है ज़रूरी नहीं है कि सारी की सारी team साथ चले आके. The new acquirer might not want certain people in the team. They might just say यार ये दो लोग आ रहे हैं बाकी नहीं आ रहे. We didn't have the answer to that. So I think that transparency is very important to gain that trust. And of course you have to then also be very you know, you have to have a very big heart in terms of the failures also, and letting the team know here, acha, you know, this is where we messed up. That's okay. Let's move on, and these are the changes we have to make sure we achieve those targets that we set on for. So both cheese, I think, बहुत important है. For us, you know, we have an open door policy as most startups, and you know, we have those conversations again, time and again with our team, and we invite them to actually share their views on what they feel, you know, is right or wrong about the company. I think it has to be, we have to have the openness to take criticism as well, because ज़रूरी नहीं है कि अगर आप एक certain चीज़ सोच रहे हैं आपकी team members के साथ agree करेंगे, तो बड़ी company से और मुश्किल हो जाती है.
By the way, every time she brings up an amazing point, it reminds me, no, you're right also. So maybe I did gloss over the fact, and you know, I made it seem very simple, that you know, everyone has a common vision. But like Noreen rightly said, when you've got, you know, 5 amazing people in the room, 100 amazing people, you know, talk about the team size, there will be a lot of different opinions. So you do have to open up to a lot of those opinions. But I think what I found in my case is if you have say 100 team members, you would have one common vision that you would have said that, hey, this is the common purpose, and let's see how we can go to it. Now there'll be 100 different ideas of how we can get to that, but the common purpose was, for Kareem example, the common purpose was not to take a person from point A, आपने सदर से currently एक person को लेके जाना, and that's not the common purpose. The common purpose is how can we change the life and improve the lives of others. So you know, that person who would maybe take 2 hours to get a ride normally, and it would cost them 1,000 rupees, and they earn 20,000 rupees at the end of the month, they're actually going to get negative income if they take a ride. How can we improve their lives so they're actually more productive in the office space? They can get a ride within 4 minutes, and the ride, instead of costing them times 10, is going to cost them X amount. How do we arrive at that purpose? But you know, you're right. It's very tough to get people onto the same wavelength as you. And I think you have to be very open to, like Noreen said, the feedback as well. But at some point, you have to realize, yeah, the goal is that this is the North Star. There are 10 ways that we can reach it. Open yourself up to discussion with all your other team members, and see what's the best way to reach that North Star.
I have a question. Yes. I need to ask that pivoting and strategy building are interlinking each other. But I feel like pivoting is a broader term, and strategy development and building comes under pivoting. So I feel like when any of the uncertainty comes up, especially in entrepreneurship and when we start any sort of startup, तो uncertainty बहुत एक common चीज़ है जो आ जाती है. तो आप किस चीज़ में फेवर हो? बिकॉज हम लोग को जब कोई अनसर्टेनिटी आती है, न्यू आइडिया, स्पेशली इन स्टार्टअप, बहुत सारी चीज़ें हम लोग को समझ नहीं आती. तो आर यू इन फेवर ऑफ डूइंग अ कंप्लीट रिसर्च एंड देन इम्प्लीमेंटिंग समथिंग एंड डेवलपिंग एनी स्ट्रैटेजी, और यू आर इन फेवर ऑफ टेकिंग लाइक इंस्टेंट स्टेप्स? किस तरीके से आप इसको डील करते हो? बिकॉज ऑब्वियसली व्हेन कोविड अराइव तो बहुत सारी ऐसे सिचुएशंस आई थी स्टार्टअप में कि उन लोगों को बहुत फटाफट चीज़ें और इम्प्लीमेंटेशन करनी थी, और उस इंस्टेंट इम्प्लीमेंटेशन की वजह से स्टार्टअप्स ने नुकसान भी उठाए और कुछ स्टार्टअप्स को फ़ायदा भी हुआ. तो आई नीड टू आस्क कि आप लोग किस चीज़ में फेवर हो, और आप लोग के स्टार्टअप्स में जब कोविड आया और बहुत ऐसी अनसर्टेनिटीज आई, तो आप लोगों ने मार्केट रिसर्च की, फिर आप लोगों ने स्ट्रैटेजी डेवलपमेंट की, या फिर यू जस्ट इंस्टेंटली टुक अप द डिसीजन?
इसको थोड़ा सा डिफरेंटली देखते हैं. देखो, पिवट, I'd say इसको स्वैप करना चाहिए. पिवट इज अ पार्ट ऑफ स्ट्रैटेजी. स्ट्रैटेजी नॉट अबाउट पिवट, और जरूरी नहीं कि आप पिवट करें, यू नो. सिर्फ आपको की जरूरत है, आपको तब करना चाहिए ना. माय को-पैनलिस्ट एक्चुअली मेंशन्ड है, यू नो, मेरे दिमाग में कीड़ा है कि हर चीज़ परफेक्ट होगी फिर ही आगे जाएगी. इट्स अ टेरिबल थिंग टू हैव. यू कांट सक्सीड लाइक दैट. And that's what, you know, this journey actually taught me. You know, you actually have to go to the market first, let the market, you know, test it for you and tell you, yeah, this is how it is, and then you can keep on refining it. So I think वो वाली चीज़ आप your gut tells you a lot of things, you know. And it's at the spur of the moment where you have to take a lot of those decisions. Yeah, some of those decisions cannot be taken, you know, right away at the spur of the moment. A lot goes into it, especially when you have investment, you have a board. आपको बहुत सारी चीजें, you know, इनकी approval से करनी पड़ती है. Luckily, our board, our investors were amazing. They gave us complete, you know, autonomy to operate the way we had to. Not everyone has that, you know, that power to do. But your gut tells you a lot of things. So I think you should listen to it.
Yeah, I think very well put. Yeah.
Okay, I guess that's about it for today. And it was such an amazing conversation. We didn't realize that it's over an hour since we've all been enjoying this conversation, and I wish we had more liberty. Okay. Last liberty.
Okay,
Last question,
we are all startup here and we are celebrating failures. I want to ask one question. You are big companies now, Alhamdulillah, आप एक journey pass करके यहाँ पहुँचे हैं. तो हमारे लिए क्या room आप हमें दे सकते हैं? In not terms of investment, not collaboration. Collaboration in the sense कि at least support के लिए collaborate. कि आपका नाम ही काफ़ी है. मतलब मैं कोलैबोरेट करती हूँ टेलीनॉर के साथ. आई डोंट वांट फंड्स, ग्रांट्स और इन्वेस्टमेंट, लेकिन एक नाम होता है. इफ़ यू लाइक माई कॉज, अगर आपको मेरा कॉज अच्छा लगता है या मैं कोई माशरे का प्रॉब्लम सॉल्व कर रही हूँ, तो मुझे अपॉर्चुनिटी इन दैट सेंस मिलनी चाहिए कि एक नाम मेरा एटलीस्ट हो जाए. नॉट इन सेंस ऑफ इन्वेस्टमेंट, वो तो आप स्टेप बाय स्टेप. आई बिलीव इन बेबी स्टेप्स. ठीक है, इन्वेस्टमेंट लेके और टेंशन लेके किसी का पैसा लेना, इट्स नॉट दैट इजी. रातों की नींद ऑब्वियसली उठ जाती है, तो वो इजी नहीं है. मैं कोशिश करती हूँ कि बेबी स्टेप लेके हम आगे बढ़े. ठीक है ना, वो देर पा होगा और टेंशन फ्री होगा. तो ये मेरा क्वेश्चन है कि हमारे लिए क्या रूल है एज वी ऑल आर स्टार्टअप्स.
I'll ask you. एक चीज तो ये है कि जो आप कह रहे हैं ना टेंशन फ्री, तो वो टेंशन फ्री तो कोई काम नहीं है.
मतलब किसी और
Whether you get the funding or not.
I can take risk my own.
So at Telenor we do provide a platform to the startups. We have lot of ads, lot of solutions. Believe me, जितनी भी आप प्रोडक्ट्स देख रहे हैं, पैकेजेस आ रहे होते हैं, इसके पीछे कहीं ना कोई सॉफ्टवेयर आज इन्वॉल्व होता है. So we have launched multiple products in past, और अभी भी हम in process हैं. But it all depends on how strong your product is. So and whether it serves the purpose जो टेलकोस के लिए. Let's say अगर आपने कोई ऐसी प्रोडक्ट डिजाइन की जो कि टेलको की बिजनेस को कॉम्प्लीमेंट करता है, उनके सब्सक्राइबर्स को कोई एडेड बेनिफिट दे रहा है, एडवांटेज दे रहा है, इंक्रीजिंग देयर सेल्स. सो यस, वी डू प्रोवाइड प्लेटफॉर्म, वी डू प्रोवाइड सपोर्ट. हमारे बहुत सारी प्रोडक्ट्स हमने फर्स्ट टाइम लॉन्च की थी. आई रिमेंबर समवेयर like 8-9 years back, a startup comes up with a solution of track life, जिसमें एम्प्लॉइज फार्मास्यूटिकल कंपनीज का सबसे बड़ा चैलेंज क्या होता था कि वो एक शहर से उनके जो लोग जब जो इंटीरियर में पोस्टेड होते हैं उनको दे हैव टू ट्रैवल. लेट्स से अगर वो गुजरावाला से किसी आउटस्कर्ट्स में जा रहा है तो वहाँ पे शायद उनकी टीम है, वो गुजरावाला वाला उस डॉक्टर को जाके सर्व करता है. और हर फार्मास्यूटिकल कंपनी उसके बेसिस पर उनको कंपनसेट करती है. लेट्स से ट्रैवल पे उनको सर्टेन टीएडीए मिलता है. वो चैलेंज हमेशा से फार्मास्यूटिकल कंपनी का था कि उनको पता नहीं होता. वो फोन पे चेक कर सकते थे कि यार आप गुजरावाला से उठ के अगर सरगोदा गए हैं तो क्या आप वाकई गए? अच्छा, आप डॉक्टर से मिला है, ये आपका एक दिन का टीएडीए बनता है, वो क्लेम करता था जो सेल्स ऑफिसर होता है. दैट स्टार्टअप केम विद द आइडिया ऑफ ट्रैक लाइफ कि सिम जो है ना, वो सिम वुड टेल कि ये वहां से वहां गया या नहीं गया. उस वक्त गूगल मैप नहीं होते थे, तो वो क्या करते थे, पॉइंट ऑफ सेल मार्क करते थे कि ये डॉक्टर इस जगह पे है, ये मार्क हो गया सेल साइट के बेसिस, नॉट जीपीएस. उस वक्त जीपीएस नहीं था. और वो जब उस सेल साइट के रेडियस में आता था तो उसकी ट्रैक हो जाता था कि यार हाँ ये वहां तक गया. सो शुरू में हर टेलको कंपनी ने वो लिया. इसी तरह और बहुत सारी प्रोडक्ट्स आती हैं. सो कोई एंड नहीं है. वो अगर वो चीज उनको सूट करती है, कस्टमर फोकस टू वाइंड.
Yeah, sure. Otherwise, I was about to take this.
Then you take it. No, please take it. I insist.
So that's one part. but then you also need to reach out to Telnor Velocity. What Velocity does is that we support startups and we help them scale, right? So we give them access to our 49 million customers base, our farmers, our 10 million MTA users, and our retailers, and we provide them the opportunity to use our SMS and marketing services, IoT cloud. So that's one part, but if you have other queries, you can always reach out to us. You can write to me, you can write to Madiha, and we would like to support you in whatever capacity feasible. But if you would like to add more, Madiha.
I'm sorry, मैं छोटी सी बात. Thank you for that question. आप अपना पहले नाम बताइए.
And Amreen, what is it? What is your startup about?
It's a waste management company in Karachi. As you know, it's a big problem. तो उसी को हमने चाहा कि opportunity बनाए. तो it's a women based company और हम door to door garbage collection. हमारा main जो है zero waste policy पे. We are doing zero waste policy. कि वेस्ट तो हर जगह से उठ भी जाता है. मेरे घर से उठ जाता है, मेरा कंसर्न नहीं वो ज़ीरो होता है या नहीं होता, लेकिन होना चाहिए क्योंकि सांस तो मैं इसी इन्वायरमेंट में ले रही हूँ, मेरे बच्चे और हम इसी इन्वायरमेंट में. वो जलता है या वो ग्रीन हाउस गैस एमिट करता है, तो मेरा कंसर्न है वो होना चाहिए एज अ
Great ideas, and thank you for that question. So थोड़ा सा फर्क मैं बता दूँ. So Buddy works with startups like Devu Adda maybe, जिन्होंने काफ़ी scale, growth, revenue achieve करी है, and we are there to help startups like you. So like Farah said, please write to us. We'd love to explore your idea. And the way you spoke about partnerships, so my quick answer is that we could help you build your brand. We could help you with segmentation. We could help you get the word out. So there have been a few partnerships I'm very proud about. सीरीत कहानी जैसे आप जानते होंगे, हमने उनको ये वाली भी बात कर रहे थे. It's important for us that the product should add value to our customers' life. Again, the way is via the GSM technology, and we have a lot of other APIs also that your product goes out to our customers, but we can discuss more about it. And this is a message for everybody here. लोग जा चुके हैं. So Velocity is an accelerator, and we look forward to working with startups where you're at least you've proven आपका product market fit. बेशक अगर आपकी उस तरह से traction नहीं है फिलहाल, so do come have a word with us. We have a lot of avenues, and of course this is a great cause. Maybe we can help you build your brand or get the word out. And help you with your marketing strategy. Thinking out loud right now. So I'm just going to leave my email address with team NIC here, and then you can get in touch.
Thank you.
I'd like to do 1 second because you mentioned something very interesting, and Amreen, right? Amreen, आपने बड़ी अच्छी बात mention की on the waste management, and I think that's the beauty of the ecosystem over here. So as Devu Adda, we have a purpose. We want to be the best in logistics and fulfill that ecosystem. But there's so many other different parts that come into that. So my panelists over here, I've had the pleasure of interacting with them over the last few months. Someone like Noreen, she has more financial expertise than I'll probably ever have. So you've been able to feed into that. Someone like Wali, he has a telco expertise that I would love to have, but I don't have. He's been doing this for a lot longer than myself. So we can all band together. आपने waste management की बात की. One of our sister concerns of Devu is Devu waste management. So 90% of the waste management that's done in Lahore is actually done by Devu. So and a lot of people, I think Devu, I'm saying this on camera, but I shouldn't be saying it, but we've done a terrible job of marketing some of our companies. We are actually a very, we do a lot of different things, and just apart from busing, we do everything from LNG. At Devu Adda, we're getting into electric vehicles. So we're a big proponent of the green economy. So there might be certain folks out here that know more about the green economy than we do. So we would love you to come on board and kind of give us information on how we can band together.
Thank you.
Okay, so finally we are going to call it a day, and would like to thank everyone at NIC who participated today. Would also like to thank the management of NIC, Umar Saab and Majid, Tuba, the entire team for supporting us for doing this episode of Duckstories, and we do hope to come back with another story at some point. But a big shout out and thank you to all my panelists, Tariq, Noreen, Wali. Thank you. Tariq is literally flew in from Lahore, and so did Wali. And that's huge favor to us. And Noreen has to catch a flight after this. So they've taken out a lot of time, and that also shows their willingness to give back to the community. But I think they're also very approachable. Can they all reach out to you for any queries and support? Yes, please reach out to them, and do follow the Telenor Velocity page. We keep giving insights on what we are doing, our work about startups and how we support them, as well as our community engagement efforts. So once again, thank you everyone.
Thank you.